First off, what is your reaction to the creation of this new advisory committee on top of the task force we already have that's looking into extortions or investigating extortions?
I welcome it, and I'll tell you why. Because it's important that we hear from the community. It's important that we respond to community needs. And this will fill a really good, I'll say, little bit of a gap that we have. And I look forward to working with them. In fact, I'll be meeting Mr. Dadwal today, later.
When he was making this announcement, Premier Eby referenced inconsistent communications between police and some of the community members involved, and said that that can send the wrong message to extortion victims. I just want you to hear a little bit of what he said.
We absolutely have to close this gap between the community's experience of policing south of the Fraser, the response to extortion when they get a threat, and the understanding of police leadership south of the Fraser about what's happening. Because there is a gap. When I meet with police leadership, they assure me that they are on top of this, that people are receiving the best possible response, that there are no additional resources that are needed. But when I meet with community leadership, they say that that is not their experience, that people call in extortion threats and they don't get a response. They call in multiple times, people don't attend. That when there is a response, it's inconsistent between people in the community, the level of service and support and safety planning that they get.
That is Premier David Eby speaking on Wednesday. I'm wondering what you make of those comments, Chief.
Yes, there's a lot there, but I'll start off with the latter part of his quote when he mentioned that there's a call made and people don't respond. That's not our experience. I've checked twice now. Our experience is when somebody calls our dispatch center, that a police officer does arrive on the scene. Now, we have had complaints where the follow-up to that original request, an update perhaps on the investigation, or looking at some of the safety planning or some of the other issues. We've had issues with that, and we're working on fixing that. We do need to provide really good customer service to the community. The second part I'll mention, Stephen, is about the quote about police leadership and so forth. I have not had a personal conversation with the premier, and so when I interact with the I'll say the E division staff leadership or with the task force, then we have multiple meetings a week at different levels and so forth and so on. Can we do better? Of course we can. And I look forward to the meeting that police leaders are going to have next week here in Surrey. And then looking at communications to the community. This is so important. And I meet with community leaders, and of course, we have a very robust communications campaign to the community as far as website is concerned, attending the forums, my speaking engagements with the media, et cetera, et cetera. But again, nothing is perfect, and we can always improve. And I think this group that's going to advise both the community and the various police agencies, I think is very positive. And I look forward to working with them and putting together an enhanced plan to the community and taking it from there. So I think this is a very good step.
The Premier Eby also suggested that the police transition is a possible factor in the breakdown in information sharing that would help combat extortion. What do you make of that suggestion?
I don't think so. My belief is that we work well with the 5 agencies that are involved in the task force. And I must say that in order to make it clear, we have a task force with 5 agencies, and they take care of very complex files. That is to say, some of the files that have tentacles to various jurisdictions. We in the Surrey Police Service have investigators as well. And the reason is we have over 100 files that we do ourselves. And we interact with the other agencies, the 5 agencies. I've been in touch with, of course, just recently with Abbotsford. I was talking with the E Division commanding officer yesterday. And so we have that going on all the time. Now, recognizing that you have a lot of groups together and it takes a while to have that synergy, but I do believe that we have momentum. But we could always do better. And when we meet next week, whether it's Peel Regional to the task force and Surrey Police Service, we're going to shore up any gaps. And I think it'll be a lot smoother because, as we know, this is not just a Surrey issue. This is not just a Lower Mainland issue. This is a Canada issue. And we have to come together. And there's a lot there. It's just not about investigations. Of course, there's legislation, there's different levels of government to be involved. So the more meetings we have and the more outcomes we have and listening to the community, I think is beneficial.
And we've also heard this week that there's sometimes more competition than there is cooperation between police departments, between the Surrey, the SPS, and the RCMP. And it was a contentious transition. Is there any residual tension between the RCMP and the Surrey Police Service?
So we've come a long way in 5 years, and as everybody knows, it was sometimes difficult, but here we are, and we are working together. Sure, between police agencies, there's always a little bit of competitiveness, but we smooth that out, and it has a lot to do with the leadership. It has a lot to do with who is in what unit. And I think we move forward from there. I'm confident that issues won't fall through the cracks just because we have 5 different agencies working together. And I must say that we have CBSA that has joined us the
Right.
last number of months. And I think that's extremely positive because these issues, these extortions, there's an element of immigration that goes across Canada. And we have to investigate certain areas of the Immigration Refugee Act and use that as a basis. Of course, that's not my lane, that's
Right.
CBSA, and they're a great partner.
Well, exactly. I mean, police resources are just one part of this conversation. Another part does involve federal legislation to reform bail and immigration. And Premier Eby brought up an instance that has been attracting a lot of comment and attention in recent days. I just want you to have a listen.
The example of 2 people being arrested here as temporary residents, then claiming refugee status after they were arrested, and instead of being deported, then being allowed to stay on in the country and have a full refugee hearing. Now, I am grateful to Immigration Refugee Protection administrators and others who appear to be expediting this as quickly as possible to be able to address it, but the idea is ludicrous.
So that is the Premier calling on Parliament to expedite the passage of Bill C-12, which is the new Immigration and Borders Act. Would that legislation help?
Well, I think that when you're talking about legislation, it has to reflect the needs of the community. And when I go out and speak to groups, when I meet community leaders, it's very, very clear that the Premier is right on point, reflecting what the community feels. And I agree with the Premier. We've experienced that, and people claim refugee status. And of course, there's a whole process for that. And that process takes a lot of time. And so I think we have to really go back foundational of what the legislation should do and what the legislation should reflect of whose needs are being met here. And I recognize the charter, absolutely. And but there's things that can be done, and I understand there's some work being done in Ottawa and the bills that are being put forward, and I see that as a positive. And of course, the bail part of it as well, going through, I see that as a positive as well.
Chief, we appreciate your time this morning. Thank you so much, and we'll talk again.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you. That is Chief Norm Lipinski, the Chief of the Surrey Police Service.